All right. Hello, folks. Good morning if it's morning for you. I'm not sure where everybody is, but we'll learn that soon enough. Thank you. Thank you guys for being here, and thank you for participating in the workshop. I'm looking forward to seeing what comes out of the workshop. I was going to take a few minutes to introduce you to Curious Learning, give you a little bit of background, and then we'll jump into introducing the whole team and hearing from you guys, too. So a little background on Curious Learning. It actually started as a research project about 4 years ago when we, between three universities, between MIT, Tufts University, and Georgia State University, where we asked this kind of crazy question, which was, could kids learn to learn, basically, and specifically learn how to read by just using mobile devices? And our first tests were in a couple very remote villages in Ethiopia that were way off the grid, and much to our surprise, giving a set of kind of curated apps at that point in time only in English to a set of kids in Ethiopia and letting them explore those on their own and build their own kind of collaborative learning environment, that after the course of a year they had roughly learned the same thing they would have if they had been in a well-resourced kindergarten in the U.S. And this was kind of so shocking and surprising to us that that Stephanie and I, who you'll meet in a moment, kind of rolled up our sleeves and tried to test and see if we could replicate those kind of results in different circumstances around the planet. So we currently have deployments in South Africa and Ethiopia and Uganda, Guinea-Bissau, several locations in India, Peru, and a couple of rural locations in the U.S. And yes, we are seeing similar kind of results in different situations, and that's prompted us to really think about how we scale this and make this available. Part of what's kind of inspiring to me to kind of give you a high level of some of the numbers is that there's roughly 750 million adults on the planet who are illiterate by a very low standard of literacy, and another couple 100 million kids who are destined to kind of join them or stay illiterate in their lives. And so that's roughly 1 billion people on the planet that are illiterate. And the idea is if you could bring even a small subset of them into a basic level of literacy, that it could have a profound impact not only on their personal lives, but also on the global poverty level. So with that in mind, what part of our intent of the workshop is to start that process of building more and more open source apps that can become available to anybody and everybody and can be readily and easily translated into lots of different languages to kind of facilitate that process for people who wouldn't otherwise become literate. And the kind of really ambitious goal is to produce a set of apps, get it translated to 50 or 100 languages in the relatively near future, and then make that available to tens of millions or hundreds of millions of people over the next few years to come, and see how many of those people we can give the opportunity to come into literacy. So that's a quick overview of where we are. I thought I'd now take a moment to give you a little more background on introduce myself. I'm Tinsley Gallion, and besides being the co-founder of Curious Learning and one of the instructors for this workshop, have taught with some of the other instructors on this course classes on early app design and development at both MIT and Tufts, and look forward to going through the process with you guys. Want to go around and let our team introduce themselves, and then go around and let you guys introduce yourselves. So I'll ask folks to kind of give their name, where they are, and we came up with one question that we wanted to ask everybody, and I'll start by posing that question, answering it myself, which was, what's the first book you remembered reading? This gives us a chance to think back of what it was like to be a kid learning to read, too. So for me, not a particularly inspiring book, but it was one of the very early readers. I don't remember the title of the book. I believe the two characters in the book were Dick and Jane. And what was particularly poignant for me is that the dog's name was Tag. And that was my nickname. That's my initials. That was my nickname. So that's one of the reasons I remembered it so well. So one of the basic readers. So let me pass it on to Stephanie.
It's me.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. It's going to be quite a pleasure to meet all of you and hear something about your background and your interest on why you decided to take this course. My name is Stephanie Gottwald, and I am, besides being one of the co-founders of Curious Learning and an instructor on this course, I've also taught app design and literacy courses at Tufts and MIT, along with Tinsley, as well as having led research efforts here at the Center for Reading and Language Research at Tufts University into the characteristics of children who have difficulty learning to read. How do you design curriculum and intervention efforts for those children? And then I've also engaged in professional development for teachers all over the world to give them guidance on how they can help children learn to read. And as far as the first book that I remember reading, I know from family anecdotes that my brother, in his boredom being out on the farm, taught me how to read before I went to school, but I don't remember any of that. What I do remember is in the first grade being given a copy of the book Charlie and the Chocolate Factory by my first grade teacher and feeling very, very special that I was given that gift, as well as then just enjoying the book itself. I mean, how can you not enjoy a book where you get to see rivers of chocolate? And that love of reading and the love of chocolate has persisted well into my dotage. So I'm going to pass this on now to Ben.
Hey guys, I'm Ben Burge. I am the workshops project manager. You've probably read messages from me before, but it's really nice to talk with all you guys. So I am a product manager at Curious Learning, and my educational background is I have a Master's of Technological Entrepreneurship from Northeastern University in Boston, Mass., and then also a bachelor's degree in computer science from Wheaton College in Norton, Massachusetts. The first book that I remember reading would probably be Harold and the Purple Crayon, and I remembered how awesome it was that Harold could draw himself a pie. And I was like, that's great. I'd like to draw pies for myself that I could eat. And the next person I'm going to pass over to is someone calling in remotely. This is Micah. Micah, you there?
Sorry, I had it on mute on my side. Can you hear me?
Yep, definitely. Go for it.
Great. Yeah, first of all, thanks to meet everybody over phone, and really looking forward to interacting with you via Slack and email and all the different ways we have to interact with each other. Real quick background, I came out to Massachusetts to do my PhD at MIT at the Media Lab. That's how I met Tinsley. My PhD ended up being in what I call storycraft for the Internet of Things, with a particular focus on pedagogy and children diagnosed with autism. And one of the big things in that, with that population, is language and communication issues. And so, there's a lot of research looking at, any early exposure to language and language skills are, a leading indicator of life outcome. And this is also true, just kind of generally speaking. So that got me involved in that type of work. Maybe this sounds a little bit sad, but I didn't read many books growing up, so I have my earliest memories of books that I can remember reading are books by Herman Hesse, which were super awesome. I'm sure I read other books before that, but I didn't really become, I didn't really develop my love for reading until kind of my teens or even late teens,
Awesome. Thank you, Micah. So I'm going to actually kind of go down the participant list right now and unmute you guys if you want to introduce yourselves. I'm going to start with
Ask them to introduce themselves, let us know kind of where they are, and if you want to say something about why you're taking the workshop, that'd be great. And then if you're willing to answer the question about the first book you read.
Yep. Actually, before that, I'm going to pass it to Lauren, because Lauren didn't get to introduce herself. Sorry, Lauren.
It's okay.
Hi everyone. I am so pleased that you've joined the workshop. I know I've been the main point of contact. So, anyways, really thrilled that you're here and really excited for the team that you get to work with. Okay, so a little bit about myself. I'm Lauren. And my background is I received a bachelor's in psychology from Duke University. I'm really fascinated in the psychology of education and have mostly been working on more of kind of the business marketing side of things for Curious Learning. So I've loved working with this team. In terms of the first book I read, it was Frog and Toad's Great Adventures. I read it with my granddaddy. I forget which one was more mischievous, but I think Toad was more mischievous. And they had, there was something about tear soup, where they cried all the sad things that happened in the day or the week. And then at the end of the week, they had tear soup to drink. And for whatever reason, that was, I thought that was pretty funny. So, anyways, welcome. And yes, let's start off with, I think, Audrey, if you would like to, again, share your name, your background, where you live, the first book you read, and then anything else about yourself you would like to share. So, welcome.
Hi. Thank you all for putting this on. Can you hear me?
Yep, definitely.
Okay. So I am based in Boston as well, and I just went through a programming boot camp after 5 years in HR. So I'm trying to learn as much as I can about new technologies, and was very excited about the goal of the workshop in general, because I have always loved reading. I think that my earliest, definitely one of the earliest books I read was the Little House on the Prairie series. And I remember we would read one chapter before bed. My mom and little sister and I would get in bed and read that together, and I always just wanted to read more and more, and so eventually figured out how to read myself so I could read ahead and stay up late reading.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
Very cool.
Thank you, Audrey.
Yeah, thank you, Audrey. Next, we're going to go on to Erica. Erica, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello. Hi.
Hey, how's it going?
Hi, so my name's Erica, and I am also Boston-based. So I really wanted to participate in this workshop because education is my main area of interest. I actually initially moved out here to Boston to work as part of the program evaluation team for the Education Nonprofit City Year. So we were really, our main focus was studying educational outcomes for the students that we were serving, which were primarily in urban cities across the United States. And then from there, I also went on to a boot camp program here in Boston and have been working for the past couple years for an ed tech company out here in the Seaport District. The earliest book that I can remember reading as a kid, I think it was called Snow. I don't actually remember much about it, but I just remember it was about this community of snow people and their snow pets, and I, as a kid, was just so, I guess, enchanted with this. One of the characters had a little pet snow dog, and I just remember being really drawn to this book for all of the snowmen.
That's awesome.
That's great. That's great. Thank you,
Awesome.
Erica.
Yeah, thank you, Erica. Next, we're going to move on to Nick. Nick, are you there?
Yeah, Yep, sorry about that. Just had to unmute my mic. I hope you can hear me now.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Nick.
So I actually just graduated from a coding boot camp myself. Actually, I graduated from the same boot camp as Audrey.
Oh,
We were in
cool.
the same cohort together. I'm also from the, not the Boston area, I'm from Mass. I'm actually located just in the Metro West area. And prior to deciding to take up coding, I had worked in live television, which was very interesting and exciting, but, you know, decided to make
Yep, I think we'll.
a new challenge. A lot of new code and trying to expand my horizons. You know, and doing anything related to education is always I was not a good literary learner, but I couldn't. First thing I
So far, it's just cutting out.
something, but you know, that's the first reading was 1984. So
Ooh.
That's complex.
Yeah.
well, that's sort of like a weird curve. I go from like comics to 1984.
That's great.
That's just what it is.
That's great. Well,
That's
thank you,
awesome.
Nick.
Thank you, Nick. Next, we're going to move on to, I believe it's Sachin. Sachin, are you there? Oh, he's traveling. So we are going to move on from Sachin to Satya. Satya, are you there and want to introduce yourself?
Hello.
Hey,
Am I
Satya.
audible?
Yep.
Hey, hi. I'm Satya. I'm based in India. I'm an entrepreneur. I've been like coding for around like 5 years now, and I basically picked up coding app development recently, and I've built product for job assessment assessment for students so that they can take jobs on the basis of that score. Right now I'm also working on a product which basically makes the assessment part of assessment of a student fun, and so that they can take job on the basis of playing those games. In brief, if I have to tell you, it's a bit of a combination of Candy Crush and a job portal like Indeed.com. Combination of that.
Nice.
Very
People
cool.
play games so that they got some scores, and on the basis of their score, they also get a job offers.
Very cool.
So though I guess that I have one more product that is basically where people can know what other people are reading. It's sort of a Twitter for ratings. It's like if I want to know what Stephanie's reads on a daily basis, like what kind of articles you read. So basically, I can go onto your reading list and see what stuff you are reading on a daily basis.
Very cool.
That's
Very
very
cool.
cool. You'd be very bored by what I'm reading, but that's very cool.
Where in India are you?
I'm in New Delhi right now.
In New Delhi. Okay, great.
That's great. Thank you, Sachin.
Thanks, Satya.
Satya, I'm sorry.
Next, we're going to move on to Tim. Are you there, Tim?
Yeah.
Very cool. We can hear you. Go for it.
I am. My name is Tim Lewandowski. I have a master's in mathematics and a master's in music and jazz performance, and I'm also right down the street from the Curious Learning folk. Currently, I'm a software engineer at a company called Luminoso, and I was hoping to use. I've gotten some experience making incremental changes to a large and complicated application of it, and I'd like the opportunity to build my own from scratch.
Cool. Very cool.
The first book I ever read the first book I remember reading, I should say, my dad brought me home one of his favorite books from childhood, which is Tom Swift, which is kind of like like if Tony Stark was a Hardy Boy.
That's a good
And I read it.
description.
I completely read it the first night, and so he went around to all the garage sales and old used bookstores and came back with a stack of 20 or 30 different Tom Swift books.
That's awesome.
And I read through them all.
Great.
Very cool.
All right. Thank you, Tim.
Thanks, Tim. Looks like Vinit doesn't have audio capability, but hi, Vinit. I think we're going to move on to Vishwaksan. Are you there, Vishwaksan? And am I pronouncing it correctly?
Yes.
Nice.
Hello.
All right.
Hello, guys. I'm Vishwaksan. I'm based out of Buffalo, New York, and I've just wrapped up my master's degree and currently working as a software engineer at Cinecor. So one of the interesting things that drove me towards this workshop was the kind of the open source work that you would be contributing to, and apart from that, working along with the literacy games and doing something for the humanity as well. And apart from that, you get to learn the React framework and things like that. So that drove me towards this workshop. And one of the few books that I have read and I found it to be truly inspiring would be Alchemist by Paul Coelho. So I feel it's a must-read book for most of you, because it gives us an important message of never losing hope, even during difficult times. So yeah. That's pretty much all.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much. And I think that's it for our introductions. I'm going to pass it over to Stephanie, who's going to be talking about why early literacy matters.
All right. Thank you, Ben. So to answer that question, I'm really going to break it up into two different questions. So on the one hand, the question is, why would we choose to work in the area of literacy, and then specifically why early literacy? And I'm going to tackle the why literacy question first. As Tinsley mentioned in his brief introduction of Curious Learning, there are approximately 750 million people in the world, adults above the age of 15, who are illiterate. There's approximately 60 million kids in the world who don't have access to school, and another 150 million or so who are attending schools that are woefully overcrowded or under-resourced, basically in places where they have essentially no hope of ever becoming literate. And the effect of that is economic as well as health effects. So we know that individuals who never become literate or are less likely to participate in any kind of healthcare system. So their health is in danger. They're also less likely to pursue job opportunities that would allow them to earn more and to have a more stable living. There's some estimates that, for instance, the Ebola crisis in Western Africa could have been cut dramatically shorter. There would have been fewer people who would have become ill or died if the literacy rate in Western Africa had been higher. So, the question of why would we tackle literacy, has a dramatic kind of economic as well as social and health benefits for people around the world. That becoming literate, even slightly literate, so not necessarily reaching the level of literacy that allows you to read Moby Dick, but just being able to write your name, being able to share your phone number with somebody can have a dramatic effect on your earning ability. So, the United Nations, UNESCO estimated, based on their very, very low measure of literacy, which is just the ability to write your name or read and write a very brief sentence about where you live and where you work, that if we brought 170 million people in the world up to that level of literacy, we could potentially reduce poverty by approximately 12%. So one of our goals in Curious Learning is basically to test that hypothesis. We figure if we get even 100 million people into that level of literacy, or maybe we only reduce poverty by 10%, or maybe we reduce poverty by 20%. Either way, we come out ahead, and we would like to test essentially that hypothesis. So then the question of why early literacy is directly connected to why literacy. There's an enormous amount of research around the world that shows that if you can start introducing children to literacy basically in utero, or at least at birth, you have a much greater chance of that individual becoming literate. There's a lot of research in countries like the United States, Great Britain, and Germany showing that children who come from highly literate homes are essentially, have almost a zero chance of not becoming literate themselves. On top of that, we know that even in areas of the world where children aren't exposed to literacy in the home, if they have the opportunity to attend, for instance, a well-resourced preschool. So meaning if they're exposed to literacy, say for instance, by the 3rd year or the 4th year of their life, then those children have a much greater chance of becoming fully literate and not just achieving high academic standards in primary school, but also have a much greater chance of going on to secondary school. And there's been some research showing that investment in early education has, for every dollar you invest in early education, there's something around, I think a $77, I think that was the figure that I saw, a $77 return on that dollar invested over the lifespan of that individual. So, there's one question is, why literacy? Another question is why early literacy? For me personally, I've spent approximately the last 20 years working on questions around reading disabilities and literacy and how do you teach literacy. And it's clear that, the brain goes through this vast really revolution when it begins to read. In fact, I saw a presentation this last weekend by the neuroscientist Al Galaberta, who brought up some really interesting, fairly new evidence showing that the left hemisphere of literate individuals is much bigger than the left hemisphere of illiterate adults. So, it's not just that the brain undergoes this revolution of circuitry, but it actually has an impact on the actual physical size of your brain, which is just an indication of how much work your brain is going through and how much it benefits, in essence, from the work that you do when you're literate. And being able to present children with content that is in their own language is also of a huge benefit to their eventual literacy outcomes. So, it's one very, very large task to get kids to read in a language that's not their own. And unfortunately, up until now, most all of our content has been in English. And while that's typically of great advantage to the children in the long run, where they oftentimes will have to communicate, as we can see here. Many of you are not necessarily native English speakers, and yet you're able to participate in, across oceans in this seminar partially because of your ability to speak English. However, that presentation of content in a language that's not their own actually presents a very big barrier to some children. It will make it harder for them to learn to read. And so if we can share with them materials and content in their own language and then transition them over into some other global language, it would be of huge benefits to the children. So I'm sure, in the first week, there's a lot of readings about the brain and about literacy. There's a great deal more to learn than I could ever present to you in just 5 minutes. But I look forward to hearing some of your questions over the next few weeks and also working together with you on how you can take, the design of your app and really present something to children that would be a really productive learning experience.
Very cool. Okay. All right. I was just going to move on to workshop highlights. So there's only 3 things that I'd want everyone to kind of take away from this meeting today about the workshop. The first thing is that we're going to have 2 main channels of communication throughout the workshop. The first one is Slack, and I believe that everyone that's going to be participating in the workshop has already joined Slack, so thank you. Slack is going to be a lively place in the upcoming weeks. We have multiple channels for discussion. We have a React Native channel, we have a app design channel, and we have a learning literacy channel. And we definitely recommend that you set aside maybe half an hour to an hour each week to not only pose questions in those Slack channels, but also kind of share any insights that you have on reading the material. And we'd also like Slack to be a place that you're not just asking questions, but a place where you can learn and grow and teach other workshop participants. We have a lot of smart people in this workshop, and I think you can learn a lot from each other. The second communication channel that we're going to be using is a Kanban board. So if you haven't already, you will want to download the ZenHub browser extension at zenhub.com. And I'm going to actually show you an example of a Kanban board, if you bear with me a second while I figure out how to share my screen. Sorry about this, guys. Anyway, so a Kanban board, if you haven't used it before, it's just a visualization tool for work and workflow. A basic Kanban board has three main components. It has three columns: a to-do column, a in-progress column, and a done column. And basically what you're going to want to do is you're going to take a task card from the to-do column, you're going to move it to the in-progress column, work on it, finish it, move it to the done column, go back to the to-do column, grab a new card, put it in progress, and you move all of your cards from the to-do column all the way to done. And each week I will be rolling out new tasks every Monday. To give you some tips about, hold on one second. Here we go. Share my screen. All right, thank you. So to give you an example of a real Kanban board for the project, you'll find if you have ZenHub, you'll have the boards tab here in your GitHub project repo. What I really recommend for everybody is there's some kind of extraneous columns that I've set up that's more for my own work. What you can do is you can collapse those columns by clicking on the pipeline options gear here and selecting collapse. The only ones that you will want to keep open are the to do, in progress, review, and done. But that'll keep things nice and clean for your view. To give some background about the usage of Kanban, it started being used in the late 1940s by the Toyota car company. Basically what they did is to visualize how far along a car was in the manufacturing process. They would have these cards that they would pass along the line, and they'd have colors that would say, you know, I need this certain part at this point in the assembly line. But how it's been used for software development starting in the mid-2000s is really just to tell you what work needs to be done and keep you focused on only one or two tasks. Some other recommendations for using the Kanban board, it's really good to only pick one or two cards at a time from your to-do list. The idea is if you're working on too many things at any given time, your brain is juggling so many different things, and if you can focus on only one or two things at a time, so much the better. For the workshop tasks, what you'll see is each card will have a short sentence description about it. You can click into it for more information. When we get into the software development portion of the workshop, hold on a second. When we get into the software development portion of the workshop, you'll see the task cards kind of changing format to a really common format called user story and acceptance criteria. What a user story is, if you've never heard of it before, is a very simple way of clearly defining a task that needs to be done. And a user story is always written in the format as a blank, I want to blank, so that blank. So an example of a user story for a workshop project might be, as a child, I want to be able to touch and drag letters across the screen so that I have a more interactive user experience. The beginning of that user story as a child kind of tells you the context of who's going to be using a particular feature or function. The next is what do they want, to tap and drag letters across the screen. And then the last part is always why do they want that. So kind of as the software developers, it's going to be totally up to you guys on how you want to implement how this is done. To help kind of guide you in that regard, I was talking about acceptance criteria. You may have heard this also as definition of done. What an acceptance criteria is, the best way to think about it is just kind of a Boolean pass-fail that you can use to QA your work once you've created your implementation of the user story. So an example of an acceptance criteria for dragging letters might be, let's say we don't want the child to be able to drag letters off the screen. And another one might be, we don't want the child to be able to drag letters that have already been locked into place if they're spelling a word. So basically, what you'll be able to do is when you first read the task, read through the user story, read through the acceptance criteria, it'll give you some good guidance on how you might want to implement the user story, and then you can self-check your work through those acceptance criteria. If all of those pass, you can move the task on to done and then select the new task to work on. If any of you have any questions at all about what a user story means, what an acceptance criteria means, feel free to reach out to me. If there's a acceptance criteria that you don't think is needed, or even if there's something that I've forgotten in an acceptance criteria, definitely reach out to me. My view on kind of the software process is it's not really set in stone. It's a really interactive process on what you want to build. So that kind of takes care of the communication channels. The next thing that I wanted to talk about was just a very brief workshop overview. We've basically split this workshop into 5 main phases, or epics, if you've heard that word before. The first phase is just a setup and getting started phase. You guys are already kind of well underway for that. As Stephanie was mentioning, you're going to be learning about kind of the context of the educational background that your app needs to focus on. This will be like setting up your development environment. But then after that, we're going to be moving on to a prototyping and usability testing stage. In this stage, we're going to basically be creating a very rough version of your application that you will be able to conduct a usability study with a child near you and see what they think of it. It will be very simple, maybe just 1 or 2 interactive functions, probably placeholder graphics that we'll be able to provide for you, but kind of just see, give them the tablet or the emulator and just see what they do. If you're not able to locate a child that would be able to play test, it's also acceptable to find somebody that has no idea what your application does. After that phase, you're going to take your learnings from your usability study and you're going to start building a rough implementation of your application. There'll be more, it's going to be more robust, you're going to have more interactive functions, not quite all the way there, but you're getting there. And that goes on to the 4th phase where you will have a fully finished product with all of the features and functionality that you would like in your application. But then we have a 5th and final phase, which is refinement. This is going to be being able to refactor your code. You're also going to be adding a data collection component that we have developed into your application. And after that, you'll have a really cool React Native application for your project. And the final thing that I would like to touch upon is just about the workshop project. So not only do we want you to be able to build this really cool React Native application for your portfolio, but we want to make sure that you're able to present your cool project to anybody. So kind of throughout the workshop, we're going to be having tasks that will pretty much help you articulate what your project is, how you built it in the project's README file. So basically, what we want at the end of the workshop is if you are looking for a new job, you're looking to get a raise at your current work, or you're trying to land a new client, when the question comes up of, what have you done in the past 6 months, you can pretty much point to your project's repo and kind of let the README do the talking for you. And that's pretty much it for what I wanted to say about the workshop. I'm going to pass it on to Lauren to talk about workshop feedback.
Oh, was there a question? Oh, okay. So this is the last part before we open it up to Q&A. So I'm going to be sending out an email every 2 weeks to get feedback from you all. I'm really hoping that this is very quick. Feedback on the workshop would be really helpful as we iterate on it going into the future. So I'm purposely making the survey take about a minute of your time. I really don't want you spending too much time on it. The value is really getting quick feedback throughout the workshop. So in total, it'll be about 5 surveys. It'll just be, how much time did you spend in the first week, or sorry, 2 weeks ago? How much time did you spend last week? So we want to make sure that we're accurately sharing how much time it will take for the workshop each week. And then the next question will be, what was kind of like a highlight, what was most effective, most useful, and then what part of the workshop in the past 2 weeks could be improved upon. And then the last part will be anything else you want to share, so that's obviously optional, as well as what's your name, that's also optional, but it will help us in case we want to follow up with you and just get a little bit more texture on anything. But yeah, it should be very top line. It will be so helpful. So thank you in advance for taking that 1 minute every 2 weeks to fill that out. And yeah, so now I think we just want to open it up to some Q&A. So Ben is the tech wizard. I want to make sure I'm doing this properly.
Sure. So if you guys, we have a chat window. If you can just type your questions in the chat window, that would be great. Or actually, you know what? If you guys just want to unmute and ask live, go for it.
Yeah, there's not so many of them. We can't do that, I don't think.
Let's see if there's any questions in the chat. Nothing right now.
We'll need to have the Q&A.
Yeah, we might not have any questions because we just did the Q&A a week ago with everybody.
So is that good? So you just want to go through?
Yeah, I think we're good. It looks like we don't have any questions. I just wanted to thank everybody for joining the workshop kickoff. I hope you're all super excited. If you have any questions that you want to send, definitely send them in the Slack channel. And I hope everybody. We do have a question. I'm curious what code we will be using for testing. Nick. So. I guess I'm not really super positive about the question.
I guess the question. You want to?
Yeah, Nick.
You want to elaborate on that, Nick?
Yeah.
You can unmute and just elaborate on the question.
Okay, let's see if we can find you. Nick?
Yeah, I was just curious if we were running any particular code for testing suite to the code as we write it.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Let me unmute Micah for that. Micah, you there?
Yeah. I mean, that's a great good development question related to testing and testing suites. That isn't. That's going to be something that we can talk about and you can do kind of on your own. We're not going to necessarily go into that just because of time constraints, and like what you're talking about is like excellent code practices, and I appreciate the question. For the what we want to accomplish in this workshop and time constraints, you can do testing on your own, but we're not going to endorse testing frameworks or testing suites just for time issues. If you're going to want to be testing with React, I would suggest using Jet. But I hope that answers your question, and we can chat more on Slack
I think,
related to this.
and even before we talk about kind of the QA on the code, which is what I think we're referring to in this line of talk, that there's issues around the design of the interface. So at an early stage in the workshop, we will talk about getting the mock-ups or the prototypes that you guys are creating in front of kids ideally, but other people who don't know anything about it, and getting feedback as you watch them. So it's kind of an early kind of design and prototyping testing phase. It's not the same kind of QA we were just talking about, but that is something we will be doing in the workshop, that kind of testing. Okay.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Do we have any other questions?
I have a quick one. I was browsing through some of the cards on the Kanban board. I was wondering if those cards are going to be the same across every project, or if it's going to be specific to the project that we're working on.
They're going to diverge when you kind of get into the software development phase. In the really early stages, they are all the same. But kind of when you get into the software development, it is dependent on the spec.
Great, thanks.
Yep, no problem. Do we have any other questions? All right. I think that's it. Thanks everybody for joining. Super excited, and hope you have an awesome day. Thanks, everybody.
Or night for those in India.
Yeah, exactly. Or night. All right. Take care, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.